Thank you very much, Cathaoirleach. Minister, I'm bringing this issue to the House today for a number of reasons, but the first key reason is because since this government has come into office, and you will know yourself, there has been a very, very strong shift towards the use of public transport in so many guises and forms. And the way we can encourage people, I believe, onto more public transport is to provide the opportunities for them to use it in the first instance. So how do we do that? When we look at train stations, Dunleer train station in County Louth, Dunleer is the second biggest town in County Louth after RD in terms of a rural hinterland. It had a train station that closed in 1981. And the other two train stations in County Louth are in the middle of Drogheda and in the middle of Dundalk. Now, unless you live in either of those two urban areas, the concept of getting a train just isn't open to you, because it is physically impossible with traffic and everything else to actually either get into Drogheda in the morning because of where it's centred, or even Dundalk at the same time. A year ago, during the county development plan process in County Louth, the NTA poured cold water on the concept of opening a train station in Dunleer because they said it doesn't have the population whatsoever. So when you take the two populations away of Dundalk and Drogheda, the population in the Mid-Louth area is 25,000 people. But it's not just that Mid-Louth area. You have to take into consideration South Monaghan. You also have to take into consideration the Kells, Slane, Nobber area of County Meath as well. So it really is a very substantial hinterland. And the thing behind this is that, as I said, when we want to get more people off our motorways, out of cars and onto public transport, it's very, very difficult to that when we're not providing people with various options and a myriad of options. And I think now that where we have seen in Limerick, for example, with the reopening of a railway down there with the Foynes Limerick line, I think now there is a real opportunity to consider some of our disused and closed railway stations right around the country. And I think alongside the National Rail Strategy, which is taking place, I think there should be a dedicated government strategy or policy at examining the concept of reopening disused railways. Now, I'm not talking about reopening disused railways in areas where it would be of no use. For example, in County Louth, there's a very famous one that used to go out to Greenore or Meath. You know, something like that wouldn't be feasible whatsoever. But Dunleer train station, Minister, is right on the main Dublin to Belfast line. That whole part of the island of Ireland is part of the economic engine of the island of Ireland. And one other issue that we really have to do is to make sure that it's not a case of people from outside the Dublin region pouring into Dublin to go and work. It has to be able to show that we can provide job and economic opportunities in places like County Louth or Wicklow or even Newry and further afield, that those people are able to then properly commute into our area and that it's not being sucked into a Dublin region. So I really think the concept of Dunleer train station is something that should really, really strongly be considered, the reopening of it. I don't think the concept of, well, the population's not there to do it. Like, the population is set to grow dramatically by 2024. We want to expand the population of County Louth from 100,000 to 250,000 by 2050. So at what stage do you start to reopen railway lines? Do you just have to sit and wait for another 10 years until the population grows further? I really think that if we provide the opportunities for people to take more and increase transport, get more people off our roads, I think the reopening of railway stations in particular areas like Dunleer would be a very good move, and I'd be very keen on hearing the government's views on that.
Thank you very much, Senator McGahon. Minister to respond.
And again, just to thank the Senator, I agree with everything you're saying in relation to the modal shift and trying to move people out of private cars onto public transport. It's critically important policy from a climate, but also from just a development perspective as well, and balanced regional development. And as the Senator may be aware, the Minister for Transport has responsibility for policy and overall funding of public transport, including rail. However, the operation, maintenance and renewal of the TRAT network and stations on the network, including the former station at Dunleer, is a matter for Éire Road Éire in the first instance. The Senator may also be aware that the Programme for Government, Our Shared Future, commits towards fundamental change in the nature of transport in Ireland. The Minister for Transport believes that rail has a critical role and a crucial role to play in achieving change. It is vital that we address the constraints in the rail sector and deliver a network which allows rail to fulfil its potential in pursuit of decarbonisation priorities, rural connectivity objectives, and as a generator of prosperity for people across Ireland. To this end, the Department of Transport has co-commissioned an all-island strategic rail review. I think that's something that you've been referring to, with the Northern Irish Department for Infrastructure. The review will establish the strategic context for investment in rail across the island in coming decades. Work on the review is at an advanced stage, and a key consideration of the analysis is how the rail network can support regional and rural connectivity, encompassing service stopping patterns and the provision of stations. In addition to the Strategic Rail Review, the Eastern and Midlands Regional Spatial and Economic Strategy supports the continued development of the Dublin-Belfast Economic Corridor through targeted investment in transport, infrastructure and services, recognising its importance as a link to the European Union TEN-T core network. However, the complementarity of the EU-level investment priorities and local services would need to be considered, as would the potential integration of any relevant local development plans. The reopening of Dunleer Station is not currently included in the Louth County Development Plan, just for noting. The delivery of any new rail infrastructure involves a multi-agency approach in the planning, design, funding and construction of a scheme. To protect the taxpayer, there is also guidelines requirements in place surrounding the release of funds for capital infrastructure projects, which must be adhered to by all agencies wishing to draw down public funds. These are set out under the Public Spending Code and drawn up by the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform. Before Inroad Éireann can receive public funding to proceed with any rail infrastructure scheme, the following conditions must be met. The proposal must fully align with transport and planning policy. The proposal must have a robust business case in line with Public Spending Code, as well as the transport sector's specific common appraisal guidance. A full demand assessment using the National Transport Authority's regional modelling system is required as an input to the business case. The Minister for Transport is not aware of any current plans to reopen the station at Dunleer or to progress a business case. However, as already noted, potential service and infrastructure along the existing and potential new rail lines are being considered as part of the Strategic Rail Review. The Minister for Transport has been assured by Inroad Éireann that it will engage with any parties proposing station reopening projects such as Dunleer. Inroad Éireann will ensure that no action is undertaken which would preclude any future reopening of the station. So, Senator, I hope that gives that some assurance. So there's a number of measures that I think need to be addressed before a project like this can be, excuse the pun, be brought back on track, because I do think it's important that it's reflected in the development plans as well, and that there's an aspiration there and a business case, as I've stated, for such a project.
Thank you very much indeed, Minister.
Thanks very much, Minister.
And a final word from Senator McGahon.
So, yeah, no, I see where this is coming. And look, this is an issue that's been talked about for 40 years. So I wasn't coming to the House today expecting to say, oh yeah, we're going to look at it. This has been an ongoing issue. But the whole thing is, like, this type of stuff with the regulations, like, this is the type of stuff that made sense before COVID. But like, there's been a total sea change in Irish attitudes towards modal shift, particularly under this government of the last 2.5 years. And I think this is a good example of how government plans, what government wants to do, is actually at odds at kind of officialdom. Because to me, this speaks of officialdom prior to the COVID era. People don't want to be sitting in their cars anymore for 2 hours on the motorway into Dublin. They want extra opportunities to take public transport. So that's why I think we need some sort of a particular strategy to be able to look at it and say, do you know what? If I'm coming from Dunleer, I don't want to have to drive to Dublin. I want to have accessible public transport. And that's why I think we need to take a brand new approach, a brand new look at this. And I just think these types of regulations, while they're important, I think it's very much a pre-COVID concept. And I think new things should be considered when we have such a movement towards a modal shift and getting more people on public transport.
Thank you very much indeed, Senator McGahon. And the focal scare are.
And again, absolutely, I agree wholeheartedly with the Senator in terms of the aspiration. But these are a step-stage process that do have to be adhered to, regardless of pre or post-COVID. And certainly, there has been a sea change. You know, the reduction in fares, 20% and 50% for younger people, has encouraged and put far more people back onto our public transport network. It's critically important as government that we respond to that, and that we provide the infrastructure and the facilities and the funding, so that Bus Éireann, that Inroad Éireann can meet the demand that's there. So at present there are no plans for the reopening of the station at Dunleer or open a station at Drogheda North. Inroad Éireann has assured assured the Minister for Transport that they will engage with any parties proposing such projects and will ensure that no action is undertaken that could preclude any future reopening on the station. So I think that offers some assurance to the Senator that this is open for consideration. As I said, I think a business case has to be made for it, and I think you certainly put forward a very good argument here this morning. But I think the next stage lies back with local authorities in particular, and again, it is important to highlight it in this forum, and I do think it's critically important that we expand our rail network and expand the opportunities for people to use public transport.
Thank